Hand position's critical to a great bottom turn. The better you surf, the more fun you do have.
Welcome to the Surf Mastery Podcast. We interview the world's best surfers and the people behind them to provide you with education and inspiration to surf better. Welcome to the Surf Mastery Podcast. Today I'm chatting with Martin Dunn. And Martin is a surf coach with over 30 years experience as a surf coach and even more as a surfer himself. Martin works with all levels of surfers, from beginner right through to WCT, or WSL I should say, surfers on the tour, including Adrian Ace Buchan, Julian Wilson, Sally Fitzgibbons, the list goes on. Martin was the head coach of Team Australia between 2009 and 2013. Martin created the Level 2 criteria for Surfing Australia and International Surfing Association. I'm going to stop it there because I just keep going on with your bio. If those that want to learn more about Martin can go to Martin's website, Martin Dunn, that's martindunn.com.au, and go to the About page. You can read up all about that. It's also actually a really, really awesome website with loads of free videos and free content for all surfers just to learn more about surfing in general, surfing techniques, loads of stuff. You've obviously spent a lot of time making those videos, Martin. That's awesome. And tell me, how did you get into surf coaching?
I started surfing when I was 12, and then, when I was into my adult life, I wasn't happy in the job I was working at, so I decided to go to the university. And in those days, there was a course at Northern Rivers College, which is now Southern Cross University, which was an associate diploma in sports science, which is sports coaching. So I went and did that, and that was just a general coaching course. And from that, I started dabbling in surf coaching at that point, and that was in 1986, so it was a long time ago. And then I just found the whole thing fascinating and just kept on doing it and progressively getting more involved and more skilled in what I do. So that in a nutshell, it's a long journey, but that's basically where I started.
And still going strong today, as I can see.
Yeah, I still really enjoy it. My ethos is that whoever I work with, I want to make them a better surfer, whether they're a 10-year-old kid wanting to learn how to do a re-entry or a WCT surfer wanting to surf better heats. Everyone's got different needs and aspirations, and I'm happy to work with it at any level. As I said, I'm keen to help people be better surfers, to be a better surfer, and to have that idea and that goal in your business goal. Well, then obviously it's much easier to do a good job, because you're always trying to do a good job with that in mind.
I was looking at some of your videos on decision-making skills, and just sort of realizing that really surfing starts when you pull up to the beach and you start looking at the lineup and looking where to sit and where to paddle out. That's when surfing starts, isn't it? It's not when you stand up on a wave.
Yeah, for sure. If when you rock up to the beach for the day, and you have a look at the surf, you can make a lot of decisions about the surf before you even paddle out. And obviously the decisions are where you're going to position yourself. The landmarks you're going to use when you're in the water, the type of waves that you want to catch, consummate with your ability as a surfer. And then, obviously when you get in the water, well, then you've got all the decisions about your positioning, using landmarks. And, for some people that comes naturally, with experience. With other people, they need instruction on learning the cues that they need to look for. Because, really when you're out there, there's a lot of information going around. There's a lot of surfers in the water. There's a lot of ways that you can surf a beach on a particular day. But if you want to surf well, then obviously there's different things you should do that help you surf well. And when you think about it, the best surfers on a given day are usually riding the best waves. And that's no coincidence. It's the fact that those good surfers have already learned all of those cues. They've actually spent some time on the beach looking at the ocean, knowing where the best waves are, which wave of the set's the best wave. They've also got the understanding and the timing to actually catch those waves. So it comes through experience by self-evaluation of what you do, or it could come through someone like myself who trains people in that area.
What's the biggest mistake you see for the intermediate self-taught surfer in this regards?
Oh well, they don't spend enough time on the beach before paddling out. In a metropolitan area or in a crowded situation, what a lot of people do is they get to the beach and they check the surf out and they say, yeah, there's waves today, and then they wax up and they paddle out, and so they haven't spent enough time to actually see where the waves are and the rhythm of the ocean. And often I've thought that people make a decision. They make a decision which is, okay, I'm going to go and surf on that bank because that's where the most people are, therefore that must be where the waves are. Or they make a decision and they go to somewhere where there's no one sitting, where they might be able to get a wave to themselves. So it's about where the crowd is or where the crowd isn't, and then that's just a basic either or. Whereas if you just spent 5 minutes on the beach just waiting for a couple of sets to break, the intermediate surfer would actually have much better awareness about where they should paddle and what type of wave they should be trying to catch when they paddle out there. Because usually on any given day, if there's a set of waves coming through, there'll be two or three waves in a set. Usually there's a rhythm or a pattern as far as it might be the first, second or third wave of the set is usually a better one. So if you understand that pattern, you can actually paddle over that first wave knowing that the second one's better anyway, and then you're more likely to catch a better wave because of that, if you like, that informal study you've done before you paddle out off the beach.
Yeah, I quite often will just watch. I'm doing a little warm-up on the beach and just watching. So you also talk about, the way you approach the wave as well, like where you take off and the first thing you do when you pop up as well. Could you go into a bit more detail about that?
Yeah, sure. Like what happens is that when a wave comes in, you can take off in a number of different locations on a peak. You can take off on the shoulder, you can take off on the peak, you can take off behind the peak, you can take off too deep, you can take off on closeouts, and you can also take off too late, when you take off and the lip's breaking over your head as you're taking off. And each of those take-off positions or decisions that a surfer makes has an implication on the quality of the surfing that gets done. So, for instance, if you take off on the shoulder of the wave, your first manoeuvre on that wave will be generally flat and of low speed, because you're more on the face when you first take off. Whereas if you take off behind the peak, you're taking off behind the peak and you are basically coming from behind the section, and when you come and do your bottom turn around the section, you're faced with usually a lip or a steeper pocket section, so you do a better quality turn. So if you're a surfer and you are taking off on the shoulder, that limits your ability to perform a quality turn because of that. So you can train people to actually become more aware about their peak positioning, their decision making on the peak. And once they're aware of it, and once they're aware of their individual idiosyncrasy in that area, if they're taking off too wide, or some people on the other hand are real chargers, and they often take off, way too deep, and they'll make one in 8 waves sort of thing, because they really want to charge and challenge themselves just on the takeoff. So those guys, well, that's okay, but if they want to be successful in surfing, like a competitive surfer, that's a major mistake, because they then allowing themselves to show the judges what they can do if they're a competitive surfer. So, there's just on that, the decision making on the peak is a really big area for some people. Also, when someone takes off, they can also take off, and they can take off and go straight to the bottom and do a bottom turn, or they can take off and generate speed and go horizontally across the wave. And depending on the nature of a surfer, some people have a rhythm with it that they always take off horizontally, or they always drop to the bottom and do a bottom turn, and they haven't got the ability to vary that decision on takeoff, because they get into a rhythm. It's like it's their rhythm that they like to do. So a lot of times you're working with people, you're looking for those rhythms, and if the rhythm is out of sync for what the wave's doing, well then just at the start of the wave, well then you can discuss that with a surfer and give them other options, make them aware of what they're currently doing, and with that awareness comes the first step in any correction that may need to be done.
Yeah, so you should be able to do both. So you should be able to drop in straight into a bottom turn, but you should be able to pop up quick and get some horizontal speed depending on the situation.
Yeah, that's correct. Well, you should be able to do both, but there's a just in that one decision making area, lots of people make the wrong decision, and then sometimes that becomes a consistent error in their performance. Again, it's not that you want to find fault with them, but what you want to do is you want to make them aware of the implications of their decision. And sometimes what they do is absolutely correct, and on other days it's absolutely incorrect. So it's that versatility depending on what they're being faced with, which is the key to good performances.
Yeah. Could we talk more about the bottom turn? The bottom turn is something I've been focusing on a lot more lately, and I find when you focus and you get a really good bottom turn, it makes the top turn so much better, and yet I've spent a whole surf only focusing on the bottom turn.
Well, of course, the bottom turn is the power manoeuvre of surfing, and unfortunately, what's happening with a lot of people these days is that they're dismissing the bottom turn as a manoeuvre, just another manoeuvre, rather than the manoeuvre of surfing, and that's come about by the overemphasis in the media of racing down the line and throwing in the air. And so we're getting a whole generation now of surfers who can't do a good bottom turn because they've never had to, because they're more focused on the progressive surfing further down the line. It's really important that, in my view, the most important manoeuvre you've got in surfing is the bottom turn. If you can do the bottom turn effectively, both forehand and backhand, you're never going to have problems off the top of the wave, because that bottom turn's always going to work for you. Yeah, part of that is that you've got to have the right technique to do the bottom turn. Well, actually, there's two bottom turns. There's the major bottom turn and the minor bottom turn. And the major bottom turn is one where you come down and you bend your body at the knees and waist. So you compress like you're landing a difficult landing, jumping off a wall and landing, you bend your body. But also what you do in a major bottom turn, in a forehand bottom turn, is that you also bend and you reach with your trailing hand forward. And what that reaching of the hand does is it actually puts more weight on your front foot, so you get a driving through the bottom turn, and you hold that position. So this crouched reaching position with your hand, with your body, and you hold that for about half a second. Half a second is not a long time, but it's important that the holding is done, because what happens is then you're using the wave's power effectively at that key moment in the turn. And then once you've held it for that period of time, well, then you straighten out of the body, straighten out of the compression, and that's the thing that gives you the power off the top. If you don't bend and hold that position, what happens is a lot of surfers, they bend but they don't hold, and they apply their power too early in the turn. And when you apply your power too early in the turn, invariably what happens is you run out of speed just as you're coming off the top, and you catch rails and you nosedive when you're coming back down. And often mistakes off the top, people look at it and say, okay, there's something wrong with your re-entry, or there's something wrong with your snap off the top. But fundamentally and generally, what's happening off the top, the mistake is caused by the rushed bottom turn off the bottom. And that's just reality. Most people have what I call a minor bottom turn, no problems at all, where they come down and they just bend their body a little bit, and it's basically just getting the board on the rail to go into the next turn. If you're doing a minor top turn, that's fine, but it's not good for a major top turn that you try and do, like a vertical hit off the top or a big snap off the top with full rail turn. Well, then you need a major bottom turn to do it. On the backhand bottom turn, well, it's different. Backhand bottom turn, it's this compression again. There is a holding phase, but there's also a lifting of the leading arm as you come out of the turn. And the lifting of the leading arm is really important, that a lot of people haven't got in their surfing right now, and that's a big problem, probably right through the whole of like if you look at the surfing population, there's 100% of people who surf, probably 60 or 70% of surfers don't use their leading arm well on their backhand bottom turn.
Okay. So once you've held that bottom turn position on your backhand, you then want to kind of get some lift with your front hand before
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, you want to. It's all about unweighting the surfboard as you come up the face. It's also about the arm. Also gives you direction where you want to go. So where you're looking as you come out of the bottom turn, backhand bottom turn, that's where your arm should point as you straighten out of the turn. So it's a combination of the two things, and it's all about unweighting the surfboard so that if you like, you jump out of the bottom turn and you have maximum hitting power off the top.
Okay, and you mentioned before that for surfers having problems with their top turn, and the way you were describing it's that top turn where surfers go up and they might do a nice top turn, but there's no speed and there's no flow coming out of it.
Yeah.
You're saying that problem can actually be from the bottom turn.
Yeah, well, probably greater than 50% of the time it is from the bottom turn.
Okay.
If they either don't perform a deep enough bottom turn or a technically correct major bottom turn, or they don't perform that correctly, or they have some rotational problems off the top. But normally the first place I look for when I see someone making a problem off the top is usually the preceding bottom turn. It's a bit like cause and effect. It's all interrelated, and speed, power, and flow in surfing is started from the bottom turn. So if you have a good bottom turn, you then are going to be a good surfer, in my view. You've got the ability to be a good surfer. What a lot of coaching is going on right now is that there's a lot of competition coaching going on, so strategic, tactical stuff. There's a lot of people working in the aerial game, which is fine because that's what it is. But the problem is you're going to have surfers who are one-dimensional and not well-rounded if you don't fix the foundation areas of their performance, which the bottom turn is the major one.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned there's two different bottom turns, the major and the minor. By the way, for folks listening, there's a couple of great videos on Martin's website that really breaks them down. But is a major bottom turn something you can do on a small wave?
Sure. Yep. As long as you've got enough speed, and the section is sucky, you can't do a major bottom turn with success in fat waves. If the wave's small and fat, well then you're going to catch a rail by doing it. So you need a certain amount of speed and you need a certain amount of steepness in the bottom turn. But I've seen Kelly Slater, I've seen Mick Fanning doing perfect bottom turns in less than 2 foot waves. And really it's all about, if you look at the best surfers in the world, you look at Julian Wilson, if you have a look at his surfing at Snapper and Bells and just this last week in Western Australia, you have a look at his bottom turn, that is about as good a bottom turn as you'll see.
I know. Well, I was watching the WA, especially that heat with Julian and Parko, and just watching some of the slow-mos of their bottom turns, and like their elbows almost in the water.
Well, so you can't, in the forehand one, you can't get over any more than that because your knees stop you from leaning over more than what they were doing.
Yeah.
On your backhand, you can lean a bit more on your backhand because it's your backside that's stopping you leaning any further. But I think you can lean more on your backhand than you can on your forehand. The amount of lean you get on the turn is critical to how good the bottom turn is as well.
Mm. And just watching those guys do their bottom turns, they go into their bottom turn and they actually drive so much speed out of the bottom turn.
Again, you can see the important thing with that is their hand position. You'll see that their hand position is forward on their forehand bottom turn is forward. So if you think about it, if you're standing and you're standing with your feet shoulder width apart, if you reach diagonally across your body towards your front foot with your back arm, you'll see what happens is that your body will actually, the weight will actually distribute towards the front foot, which means there's a transfer of weight from your back foot to your front foot. And what they're doing is with their hand forward, what they're doing is that their weight is being transferred from the back foot to the front foot as they're doing the turn, and it has a driving effect through the turn. If you put your hand, so this hand position is critical to a great bottom turn. If you put your hand in line with your back foot when you're doing the bottom turn, you don't get that transfer to your front foot. Therefore, you still do a good bottom turn, but you don't get the drivey ones like the great surfers do. Some people put their hand behind their front foot. Well, then that actually works against you. You get more of a stalling effect in the bottom turn. And so this hand position, it's this compression in your body so that you compress so you put muscles on stretch so they can fully extend and get maximum power from the body. But this hand position in this forward position is critical to how good the bottom turn is. And you can learn that as a little 10-year-old grommy, boy or girl. And I was working with a 10-year-old boy yesterday. He puts his hand down, but he puts it down, touches, and immediately brings his hand up behind his back when he does his bottom turn. And so he rushes out of the turn. So he doesn't get into this forward position. I've given him training now where I'm asking him to put his hand in a certain position, which is this forward position. And out of that, he will develop, over the next couple of years, a great bottom turn, which then will develop a great top turn. So what I'm saying is a real little change in performance of a surfer, in some instances, can have a profound effect on how good that surfer becomes. And often it's things like the hand position's wrong or their arm position's wrong. It's often things like, okay, well, they're not lifting their arm up high enough to, so fundamentally some people might have a bottom turn where it's sort of 70% okay. But if they want the best bottom turn they can do, they need to do it as perfectly as possible in a major turn situation. It might be that they don't turn the head enough in some situations. So simply rotating the head another 40 degrees as they're doing a turn can turn an ordinary snap off the top into a great snap off the top. So, but what the surfer has to do first, they have to become aware of their deficiencies first and foremost. And then with their deficiencies becomes an awareness, and then you show them how it can be done. And for most people, especially people who've got an ability to pick things up quickly, they can change. They can change within a half an hour into a great turn. Like you mentioned recently, you mentioned the start thing that I had worked with Sally Fitzgibbon as a younger surfer. Mm. With her bottom turn, I said to her, she was just about to go to the world titles about a month later, and I said to her, listen, Sally, your bottom turn's not good enough. I was drawing the picture for 4 years further down the track. I said, your bottom turn's not good enough. Your hand's in the wrong position. And I said, but I don't want to talk about it too much now. I want to talk about it when you come back after the world titles, because I didn't want to upset her preparation for the world titles. This is the amateur junior stuff. Anyway, so she said, well, how is it? And I showed her, and she did some simulations on the beach. She paddled out, first wave, she did it perfectly, as good as you'd want to see, perfectly the first time on the first wave. And that's the type of thing someone like a Sally Fitzgibbon can do. But she's an exceptional learner, and she can pick things up very quickly. For a lot of people, changing technique and changing the way they do things, even small changes, can take time and persistence and patience from both the surfer and the coach. But if they're aware enough about it and they've got the right drills, the right training simulations, they can get it and they can become a much better surfer, as I said, by just changing small things in their performance.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. I've had surf coaching done, and those small little changes can make huge differences. So what about where the surfer looks? Sometimes I don't even look where I'm going to do my bottom turn. Should I be having a quick look at the bottom of the wave, or should I keep my eye on where the wave's going when I do my bottom turn?
Well, I think when you basically take off, you as you're paddling into the wave, you're actually looking, you're making decisions about, do you drop to the bottom or do you cut across horizontally. At that time, you make the decision, and if you go down, fundamentally it becomes a feel thing when you're doing your bottom turn. It's not something that necessarily you need to look, unless you're doing a turn like you're fading back to deepen the turn and set up a tighter turn off the top. But generally, as you're doing your bottom turn, you're looking where you want to go, and that's the thing about looking. What looking does is it tells you, your body and your board, where you want it to go. And there's a lot of mistakes people make because what they do is they look down the line when they should be turning the head, like if they're doing a snap, for instance, or a carve, they do the carve by looking down the line, and what that does is that crops the turn, and they get like a flicking of the turn rather than a rail turn. You know, with the bottom turn, you don't necessarily need to look. You do need to look where you're going, but generally the bottom turn is done through a feel of you're an experienced surfer. You just know when and how the bottom turn should be done. But definitely when you're doing your top turn, when you're doing your cutbacks, when you're doing any manoeuvre where there's a turning, an arc type of turn, you really do need to look, turn your head and look where you want to go to tell your board where you want to go. The only one I'd say you don't do that with would be like a layback, which is basically all you're doing there is stopping the board by laying back, and you're just fundamentally stopping the board and then recentering as you drop back down the wave face. Otherwise, you should turn your head because, one, you're telling your board where you want it to go, and two, by turning your head, it allows every other part of your body to turn. So you turn your head and then your shoulders and upper body are able to rotate, and also your hips are able to rotate. So you get a flow through your body to your feet and therefore your board. If your head doesn't turn, it locks your body and you get a cropping to the turn. So technically, wherever you can, you always should be trying to look where you want the board to go.
Okay. So when you're paddling into the wave, a quick look down the bottom is enough, and then you want the bottom turn through feel?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so you wouldn't purposely try and look at the bottom of the wave as you're going down to your turn?
No, I don't think so. I think you're basically, that's done with feel. You're more, what you're doing as you're dropping down the wave face is assessing what manoeuvre to perform. If you're a competent surfer, you might have, depending on the section, you might have 3 or 4 different options about what manoeuvre to perform, depending on the shape of the wave, the steepness of the wave, the speed of the wave. All of that information is coming in your brain, and you're assessing what goes down. Well, you're assessing that through your vision, and so you've got to look and make decisions about what manoeuvre to perform, how hard a bottom turn you should be making. Do you do a short crop one where you're trying to go vertical, or do you do a long drawn out one to make a longer section? So that's what you're doing as you're dropping down the wave face. And then, as you're doing your bottom turn, you're looking at the lip or you're looking down the line, depending on what you've chosen to perform.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'll put a link in the show notes to those videos the free videos you've got online that really break down the bottom turn. And most surfers are visual learners, so if you're inspired to work on your bottom turns after hearing that, then get a visual on it, and then if you can, get someone to film you and send the footage in to Martin. And you do online surf coaching, don't you, Martin?
Yeah, that's right. I get lots of people send me videotapes of their surfing. I evaluate their performances, and I make up a training video, what I call a focus video, individualised to them. Then I send it back to them, send the link back through YouTube or some other web video sharing site, and then that acts as their surrogate coach back at home at their own beach. And that's very, very successful, actually. So lots of people from around the world tap into that. And, as I said, the first thing you need to know is you need to be aware about where your deficiencies are. And then once you are, well, then you can move forward if that's what you want to do. If you're out there just having fun and just mucking around, well, then that sort of service isn't really necessary. But if you want to be a better surfer, well, then the video service I offer is as good as you'll find, I think.
Yeah, well, the better you are, the more fun it is.
Without a doubt. Yeah, I've seen some slogans like that. The best surfer in the water is the guy having the most fun. I've always thought the better you surf, the more fun you do have. That's correct.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. If you're not progressing, then it gets boring.
Actually, well, today I just worked with a 60-year-old doctor. He's of the opinion that you've always got to be learning new skills no matter what age, and especially the older you get. And he's decided to work on his surfing, to improve his surfing. So that's really interesting. A lot of what I've done over the years too is that I work with a lot of sons or daughters of established surfers, and obviously these guys are these guys are actually saying to their kids the same as I say to them, that the kids won't listen to their fathers. So I get to work with those sort of surfers. But it's interesting that a lot of the stuff I talk to about the kids, and I show them on video, the fathers go out surfing and they say to me, "Oh, I tried turning my head, or I tried lifting my arms, and that really works, like." And so, it's been really a pleasure and a surprising benefit that you work with a person, but other people benefit at the same time. And again, that's the reason why I produced those free videos. I did a video, an internet site called surfcoach.com before, which had like over 100 videos on it. And the whole point of that is to coach people and to say to people that, hey, there is a good way of surfing. There is a proper way of surfing it. And we're not necessarily talking about creating clones. What we're talking about here is creating good mechanics. We're talking about creating good technique. And the reality is that everyone's a different shape. Everyone's got different motor neuron and speed going from the body to the brain. And so what happens is when you teach someone to do a technique, that person still has got their style, their individual style, who they are as a surfer. And so you actually enhance who they are as a surfer because of that improvement in their technique, which improves their style as well and improves their success on a daily basis. And that just makes more fun and more confidence in their own ability in any and all types of surf.
Yeah, definitely. The fundamentals, you can never spend too much time on the fundamentals.
Well, that's right too, and and then when the fundamentals are done, well, then you can move into the decision-making area in a more effective way, like how you put your manoeuvres together. It's how you perform your manoeuvres so there's no hesitations. It's how you do your manoeuvres so that you're throwing more fins and stuff. And then also you can work in the aerial game and the progressive stuff. So there's all these different levels you can work with someone as you work with them, and you work with them over a period of time. It's just not let's fix up the bottom turn and let's fix up your finish. Okay, well if you like doing that and you enjoy working on your surfing, there's so many more layers that you can add to your performance if you're open to suggestion and you're really keen to be a better surfer.
Yeah. What's the biggest mistake you see with tube riding?
Well, tube riding. Well, there's a couple of things there. There's a lot of people who over attack. So there's a lot of people who just go for it, whether they can make it or they can't make it. I remember a quote from Kelly Slater who said, "I'll only take off on a wave if I'm 90% sure I can make the wave." Right. So he's given a little bit of doubt to himself that he's not going to make the wave, but he still believes that he can make the wave when he takes off, right? Whereas there's a lot of people who just take off because they're just going to take off. They're going to go for it. So they haven't actually been calculating about where they take off, whether this wave is a good enough wave. Like some people take off because it's a bigger wave. A big wave isn't necessarily a good wave. So their wave selection can be a problem for a lot of people, and how much they charge, like they attack the wave by their depth of takeoff. As far as what they do in the tube, stance is obviously important. Some people just don't have a good solid tube stance. Some people, obviously, backhand tube riding, a lot of people find that a lot more difficult because they can't rotate and get into a pig dog stance or some sort of stance. So they find it a lot more difficult in that regard. So you can simulate that. You can simulate that on land before you paddle out. If it's a hollow day, you can play around on the beach and simulate the tube stance both forehand and backhand. And then when you get out there, obviously, then you try and enact what you tried to do from the beach. But I suppose the most common thing I would think would be the decision about the way they take and the depth of they take it from.
Okay. See, I've got a problem with tube riding at the moment, whereas I don't seem to be able to slow down enough.
Oh, okay. Well. The other thing you can do is you can put your arm in the wave face. Do you do that?
Yeah, sometimes like I've got my arm right in there and I'm trying so hard to slow down, but I just can't get. I don't consider a barrel unless the nose of the board is in the barrel. You know, I want to get deeper in the barrel.
Yep.
And just struggling. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I'm struggling with the consistency.
Well, with that there's a number of ways of stalling, but the easiest way to stall is to take off and immediately drag the arm in the wave face. But you've got to actually drag the arm at least up to elbow. You've got to put your arm in at least up to elbow and sometimes right up to the shoulder, depending on the thing. Yeah, you stick your right arm as far in as you can, and you stick it in there until, as you're looking outside the tube, until you can see the lip coming over your head out of the corner of your eye.
Yep.
Okay, once it's come out, once you can see the lip, you're not looking at the lip, you're looking straight ahead. But when you can see the curtain out of the corner of your eye, then you pull your arm out, and you'll find that that's perfect timing to get out of the tube.
Okay.
So yeah, it just depends on how much it's. If you try and stall just with your hand, you're not going to stall, but you can stick your arm in quite a long way before you want to come to a total stop sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've got to stick that arm right in there. All right, I'll try that.
Stick it right in, and bring it back out once you see the curtain out of the corner of your eye as you're looking forward.
Yep. Okay.
Last week I was working with the best 14-year-old kid from France, 13-year-old kid from France.
Yep.
And so with him, there was a number of things we were working on. I've got a thing, like I was talking about decision making and stuff. Once you get to a certain level, you've got to try and maximise each section you enter. So this kid's a good surfer, and he's destined for the big time, I think. And so what he was doing, he'd do a manoeuvre, a good quality manoeuvre, and then the next manoeuvre he'd do a lesser manoeuvre. And it was like it's like he's having a rest, or he's having a breather. Or it could be that he's actually so satisfied with the first manoeuvre that the next manoeuvre isn't as important to him as that first manoeuvre was. So with him, one of the things is we talk about that every manoeuvre for this type of surfer who wants to go places, every manoeuvre is important. And what you're trying to do, instead of thinking of a wave as being worth 10 points, judged out of 10 points, you think of each section as being judged out of 10 points. And so you're always trying to perform the best quality manoeuvre you can in each section that you enter. That's a big step forward for a lot of good surfers if they get into that style of surfing, because what it does, it takes a good surfer, once they've worked on it, to an excellent surfer. Right? I was working with a surfer yesterday who's one of the best, not yesterday, the day before, who's one of the best Aboriginal surfers in Australia. And he's an older guy. What we're talking about with him was the type of wave he was catching. And he's wanting to do the WQS this year. He's got to start in some of the QSs this year. And so we're talking about the type of waves that he catches. And so, at his level, the type of wave he catches, you don't start out with a cutback, because that's just not a dynamic enough manoeuvre. Even though his next manoeuvre after the cutback was a great turn, and the one after that was a great turn, but the first manoeuvre wasn't great because it was too flat. So you can work with people to work on their understanding of how things should be put together, so that people actually, the viewer goes, wow, that was well ridden. You know what I mean? And so there's a lot of training that you can do with people. Once they get to a certain level, you can start talking to them about how they put the performance together, so that they always are showing a performance that's of the highest quality. Once you get up in the CT levels and the high levels, people just instinctively do that. But as they're developing, they're the sort of things you can work on. And with the 10-year-old boy yesterday, it was all about generating speed. Like what we do is with a 10-year-old boy or young surfer, often you're looking at the bookends of the ride. So the bookends of the ride are what they do at the start of the wave and what they do at the end of the wave. And they're the two things that hold the whole performance up. So this young boy, he doesn't have the skill to generate horizontal speed. So that's the first thing. He's got a standing action, which is what I call a two-stage standing action. So he jumps to his feet, back foot, front foot, instead of both feet hitting the board together. Now, that's a minor thing, but the problem is if you have a slow standing action, you can't do the action of generating horizontal speed well. So you've got to fix the standing action first, then you fix the horizontal speed action, and then obviously that's the start of the ride, and if he can do that, well, that's great. And at the end of the wave, he was hitting the end section too low. Okay, so the end section's too low, so he was making lots of errors, and he was wiping out. He was nose diving when he was coming out of the end, the final manoeuvre. So again, it depends on who you're working with, depends on what you talk about, and so every individual surfer, they all know that they've got something wrong in their performance. There's something they would love to fix up, but you can't. Like the videos I have on my websites, they are generic in nature, and they say, well, this is how you should do it, but you really do need to know exactly what you're doing as an individual surfer to say, okay, what's the next step in your development? Yeah. What's the thing that you really need to work on that can really improve your surfing? That's where either going to a coach who knows what they're talking about, or sending video to someone like me who I've been doing this for 30 years. So I've seen just about everything there is in surfing. And that's the key, and that's the message I would like to say to people is you need to actually have someone look at your surfing to find out what your idiosyncrasies are that could be improved.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, you go to a coach. Like I had a guy from overseas the other day, and his father said, well, we want you to teach him how to do an aerial. This kid couldn't do a bottom turn. He couldn't generate speed, so he was surfing slow. And there's no way you could go to an aerial with that guy because he just didn't have the speed necessary to do the aerial. So he's probably got 12 to 18 months of work on these other skills before he goes to the aerial type of performance. Other people say, let's do the aerial. But the problem is once they get away and they do it all by themselves, they'll never, ever be able to do it because they haven't got that foundation under control. It's like having the foundations in a house. You know, you have a foundation in a house because that foundation holds the house up. If you don't have the foundation strong in a surfer, when they go for their big manoeuvres later in their surfing, they won't have the consistency they want because the foundation just never allows them to have that consistency. It's as simple as that. And unfortunately in surfing right now, everyone's talking about the progressive stuff that Toledo and John and all those sort of guys do. And, you know, you can think about those guys as being freaks, and they are good surfers in other areas of their performance, but they're not the average surfer, you know. And so the average surfer, instead of going, you know, listen, I want to do airs, they should be going, listen, I want to do the best bottom turn I can. I want to do the best cutback I can. I want to do the best finish I can. And once I've got all them under control, well, yeah, okay, what's next? Okay, I want to learn how to do an aerial. Then they've got the possibility of learning how to do aerials and learning how to do them very well and consistently.
Yeah, the fundamentals. The thing is, if you can make the right decision, paddle into the wave at the right time, pop up fast, and generate speed straight away, it opens so many more surf breaks up. You know, you can go traveling, and it's amazing.
It does, and you know what you've said there. What that does fundamentally too, it increases the self-belief of the surfer. And when you've got belief in your ability, you can challenge yourself more. You can go for things and not get as frustrated. You know, you can work through things in a methodical way and actually make things happen. And you know, so everything's interrelated. And when you actually get success in surfing, you get more self-belief. So psychologically, you become a stronger surfer.
Yeah.
You know.
What's some tips for becoming faster?
You've got to be light on your feet, you know, and there's some heavy people around who may be thinking, well, I can't do that because I'm too heavy. But it's all about using your arms effectively by lifting your arms as you... I've got a video on my website, Speed Creation.
Yep.
Video, or on surfcoach.com, there's a a video on speed creation. It's all about jumping to your feet, straightening your body and throwing both arms forward. And if you can do that, what happens is it unweights the surfboard, and the surfboard jumps forward and accelerates faster than if you don't do that action. So that's a skill that every surfer should learn. Mm-hmm. Every surfer in the world should learn that skill because it'll give them so many options when they're surfing. You know, they can take off and they can generate their speed, and when you've got speed, you can do much, much better turns.
Yeah, okay.
And, you know, and the other thing about speed is that you can also have fun in small, grovelly waves.
Which is pretty much what most of us surf all the time anyway. So
which is pretty much, and you know what, I reckon this is why the guys from Florida and places in the Sunshine Coast who get a lot of small waves, they can generate their speed, and that's why a lot of them become good surfers on the international stage, because they've learned how to generate speed and they can do it anywhere in any type of condition.
Yeah, it's amazing watching sometimes those guys surfing tiny little waves and just doing full roundhouse cutbacks on tiny little waves and going so fast.
Yep. That's a crucial skill as well. You know, bottom turn and speed creation, very, very important.
How much time goes into improving technique and body position outside of the water?
Well, I recommend doing simulations for sure. I use skateboards. I use the streetboard skateboards, which are readily available in Australia, and I use them because they feel very similar to what you do in the ocean. So with those streetboards, you can simulate speed creation, bottom turns, forehand and backhand, cutbacks, forehand and backhand, snaps. You can simulate coming off the top, getting good rotation off the top. You can use them when it's flat, or you can use them just before you go surfing, and you get a good transfer from one to the other. If you haven't got that sort of thing, well then you know, even just looking at videos of surfers, say I like that manoeuvre, you can actually just go down and as part of your pre-surf warm-up on the beach, just do some of the simulations, the body simulations, you know, as before you paddle out, and that'll help you maintain your focus as well. So it's all about getting those body movements into your body, into your brain. Those simulations have a really profound effect if you use them properly.
Yeah. So I guess if you've performed a particular movement pattern or held a particular body position on dry land lots and lots of times, then when it comes to hitting that position or performing that at the motor control sequence on a wave, it's a lot easier if you've done it on land. Yeah,
sure. It just has a great transfer. And, you know, what I also do is I draw little diagrams in pencil on the nose of the board, you know, of a key body position that the surfer needs to get into, and that really helps. And, you know, all about maintaining focus when they're in the water. Mm-hmm. So that's an important thing too, because, you know, like a lot of kids, a lot of surfers might have a motivation to do a particular skill, and when they get in the water, well then, you know, there's so much going on, there's so much, you know, waves are coming in, their mates are talking to them, that they forget, they lose focus. The adage of training is, you know, used to be perfect practice makes perfect, but really it's perfect practice makes perfect.
Yeah, that's right.
And so the more you face on the skill that you're trying to achieve and stay focused on that, well, the more success you will have. As I said, some people, like, say, Sally Fitzgibbon, they just have an innate ability to maintain focus on task. And while others need lots of different ways, you know, simulations, you know, writing on boards, coming up with cue words to say as they do the action, you know, it's all to do with trying to get them to move their body in a certain way at a key moment when they're surfing. Yeah. So whatever works, you know, to get that change that I know in my coaching will help them be a better surfer.
Yeah. Have you ever had a client who was what we might call a kook? Let's say an experienced but intermediate surfer who surfs well sometimes but isn't consistent. Have you ever seen that type of surfer turn into someone who just rips all the time?
Yeah, I've seen people who have had major problems in their surfing and doing things incorrectly, and yes, turning them into better better performance. And again, it's their desire to be better, which is the key thing here, because they're the ones, after all, have to do the work. I have worked with some surfers who have come to me and they're like what I call "oh my God" surfers, which you just really don't know where to start, and they're so far out of sequence, and their technique is so wrong that you. So I always just start with slowing things down with that type of service, slowing things down and just working on one aspect of their performance. It might be a bottom turn, it might be speed creation, it might be just finishing, just something simple. And the way I operate in that situation is I give them what I consider the easiest thing to change, so that they can get success. Because if they've had little success, a little bit of success is better than no success. So you give them something that's relatively easy to change, and with time they generally can do it. So those "oh my God" surfers, there's not many of them, but I've had a few in 30 years, and they've been real challenges. But the average Joe Blow who paddles out and can do turns, you can turn them if they're motivated and they're keen to improve. You can significantly improve their performance, but it takes time. Like I'm looking at, if someone comes and sees me and I see them 3 or 4 times a year, I'm looking at probably 2 or 3 years of work with them to get to a point where I say, you're at a good point. They don't really need to come back and see me again. But what my philosophy there is that I try and help people. If you like, I try and help people have a use-by date with me. So I work with them thoroughly as much as I can, and after a while they'll go somewhere else, or they'll be more than happy with their performance, because I try and help them be self-sufficient in their performance.
Yeah.
Especially the competitive surfer, because it's important they've got to make decisions in the water without me being there. So I work really hard with my competitive surfers to learn how to think for themselves, right from when they're preparing right through their post-heat evaluation. And my job then is a second opinion, whereas you see a lot of other coaches, they make themselves dependent. They try and make the surfer dependent on them, so that they're always part of it. Well, that's not my philosophy. I work the other way.
Yeah, a good coach asks the right questions.
Well, yeah, I hope I do, and I hope I do make the right questions. But the thing is, the right question to a surfer is at that level is, what do you think? And then they explain what they think, and then you agree or you provide your other opinion if you've got one as well. So that's the deal.
Yeah. So the desire to improve is the main factor.
Without a doubt, yeah. The surfer has to want to improve, and I don't often see people who don't want to improve, but I do. I have had kids come through whose parents have sent them through, and it's been more like child minding, but that's not what I do. So the desire, because they're the ones who've got to do the work. It's not easy changing performance. It's a difficult task. You've got to maintain focus. You've got to go out and you've got to overcome frustrations. You're going to make lots of mistakes, but it's like any journey. It's something that takes time and effort. And if you want a quick fix, well then you're not going to get it by just coming once or twice to a training program. It just doesn't happen like that.
Yeah, well, you're in the wrong sport if you want a quick fix.
Well, I don't think there is a quick fix in any sport.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is with surfing, with tennis, you could go down to the courts with a ball machine and practice your forehand, for hours on end.
Yep, you could.
But sadly, the wave pool technology isn't yet accessible for most surfers, so we're kind of limited to that moment when we paddle into a wave. Is the only time we get to practice, really, isn't it? So it's unique in that respect.
Yeah, it is. But obviously those sort of things are coming. And they will be coming, and it'll be interesting when that technology comes more mainstream. You will be able to use that tool for training in a very, very effective way. the same wave coming through. You can do the same turn. You can practice that same turn, 50 times type of thing, in a short period of time. Well, that's a great way of learning. That the thing about open ocean surfing is the variability of it, and I think that's what keeps us coming back. One day it's 1 foot, next day it's 6 foot, next day it's 3 foot and on shore. It's that being able to surf well in all conditions that really gets a lot of people fired up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, that's what I found anyway. Like people don't like surfing crappy waves, bad waves, but even if they get one wave and they do one good turn, it makes their day. And I that's a really unique thing about surfing. It doesn't take much to make your day.
Yeah.
When you do something well.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to be like that. I used to not bother going out when the waves weren't that great, but recently I've started just going out. If I have a window to go surfing, I just go out. And, I love the challenge of you're trying to paddle into a 6 foot choppy onshore fast wave. I mean, that's an amazing challenge. And you catch a couple of those waves, and then next time it's, 4 foot and glassy, it feels so much easier to surf.
It's interesting. There was a guy years ago, a guy by the name of Marcus Brabant. He was like the Matt Banting of his time. Comes from the same town actually, Port Macquarie. And his father used to take him to the worst beach in Port Macquarie a week before a major contest. Mm. And at that beach there was always, just bad waves. So he had to surf the bad waves for a week, and then. The psychology was obviously when he got to the event, if the waves were bad, no big deal, and he would just paddle out. And it's just what I've been doing. If there was good waves, he was stoked and he'd be ripping because he's excited about surfing good waves. Mm. So that there's people have used and more than likely still do use bad waves as a motivation, as a training ground for specific reasons in their surfing.
Yeah, so I'm just looking on your website. You work with surfers of all levels, but you also do some consultancy work with other surf coaches.
Yeah. I've mentored. When I was with Surfing Australia, I was the head coach of the Surfing Australia, and I was head coach of the HBC for 3 years. And what I used to do there, I used to do a monthly newsletter or a monthly video I sent to all the main coaches in every state around the country, and I'd also do state visits as part of my role in that position. And the whole idea there was to educate the other coaches and discuss coaching issues and show people different ways of, what do you do, what type of training you do, what does a coach do when the surf's 1 foot. And you've got 5 kids who don't like surfing 1 foot waves, just discussing sort of things like that, and.
So what do you do? What do you do in that situation? It's a great.
Oh well, there's lots of things you can work on their speed creation. You can work on their wave selection. Even in 1 foot waves, there's better waves than not. You can work on trying to do a fuller turn in small waves, which again has a speed component to it. You can work on going down the line and trying to bust the fins out. It's up to the imagination of the coach.
Yeah.
It just depends. I went to Peru 2 years ago. After I left Surfing Australia, Peru hired me for their national coach for a year. So I went to Peru, and part of that contract was to upskill their coaches over there as well. So, I do a lot of mentoring in a lot of different ways. It's through my videos, through my courses. Like I've got courses on my website now, online courses people could sign and subscribe to, and so I'm just trying to do that. And I'm trying to do more of that, where I pass on my stuff that I know works when you work with surfers. And it's not only what works with surfers; it's how you present it to surfers. So words are powerful, as you know, Michael. And how you say something in one situation is perfectly correct, and how you say something in another situation, the surfers don't want to hear. So it's that conversation you have. You need to actually work with people how to do a better job in that regard. And I know that because I've probably made every mistake there is to make in that area over my time. But I'm more careful and more aware now of that conversation and how you have that conversation with surfers. And really what I'm talking about there is how you get the message across so it has the most weight to the surfer, has the most effect on the surfer, so that they feel positive about themselves, but they also know what to do to become a better surfer.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, we're running out of time, Martin, but just you've got so much stuff on your website. You've also got 15 instructional products like secrets of power surfing, beginner stuff. This 12 secrets to surfing success ebook is just freely available online. I just urge everyone out there to go and have a look at Martin's website, martindunn.com.au, and just check it out. If someone wanted to do a one-on-one private with you, what area of Australia do you live in?
I live up on the Tweed Coast, up near the Gold Coast, but I travel depending on the needs of someone. I generally I'm doing it up there mainly, or I do it down on the mid-north coast, around the Old Bar area, which is near Foster. Mm-hmm. I've got a place there I can work out of too. So, but it's I'm happy to work with whoever wants to be a better surfer. So, they can contact me through my website.
Excellent. Now, what's currently your favourite surfboard?
I ride Rod Dalberg surfboards. Mm-hmm. I'm riding a 6'8" around the pin. I've also got a Murray Burton quad set up, like more of a fishy type of thing. So yeah. Well, I'm a 57-year-old man which is past my best days of surfing, but I still enjoy surfing.
Yep.
So I have a couple of different boards. I've always been a shortboarder. I haven't gone on the males. I've never been a male rider. So, and I just like being able to do a turn where you can get the board on the rail. So combinations of manoeuvres. So that's why I prefer staying with the shorter boards.
What about your favourite surfer?
Well, Kelly Slater's been inspiration to me. I really like his whole game, whole package of skills. He's been a phenomenon. I like the way Mick's transformed into who he became, Mick Fanning. He showed the model where people who've got talent, who probably weren't as focused as they should have been, turned into someone of greatness in our sport. So that's been really interesting. So those two guys are probably the best two, I think.
Yeah.
In men's surfing, in women's surfing, I think Steph's been the benchmark, but I think there's other girls coming through now who are probably, she's going to find it hard to win again, I think. But anyway, that's the way the world works,
Yeah. Okay. And what about your favourite goofy footer?
Goofy footer. Well, a guy I used to coach actually, Sean Cansdell.
Yep.
Sean Cansdell. I used to do a lot of work with Sean when he was a younger guy, and a lot of people misunderstand Sean. I think he's a great guy. He's artistic. He's got an artistic mind, which is different to a lot of other people's. But his surfing is just outstanding. So I've always liked his, and I really like Bucko, Adrian Buchan.
Yep.
Mainly because of Bucko's professionalism and the like. But again, there's always new kids on the block coming through. But they're just a couple of people I know pretty well, so I like them.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, Martin, thanks so much for doing this interview. I'm going to put links to all the stuff we talked about in the show notes for those that are listening.
Yep.
And again, thank you so much, Martin.
Okay, no worries, Michael.
Thanks for tuning in to the Surf Mastery Podcast. Again, I'm your host, Michael Frampton. Make sure you subscribe so you can keep up to date with the latest interviews. Please share with your friends. Check us out on Facebook at Surf Mastery Surf. And if you're on iTunes, please go and give us a little rating. That'd be awesome. Until next time, keep surfing.